Hi, folks. We're wrapping up our discussion about the Chapter 5 fallacies that have to do with inductive errors, many of them having to do with things like poor analogies, poor causal inferences, things like statistical sampling, and so forth. I don't want to talk about too many of the practice problems at the end of the chapter because I don't want to steal your opportunity to try them on your own. But there is one that I wanted to talk about just because there's so much going on. And by the way, this one does have some commentary in the back of the book. You know, some of them do. Although I would say it's kind of sparse and insufficient. But let me read this one to you. One of the reasons I like this one is because I remember when this conversation was all the rage back in the 1990s. I was in some of your age group at that point. Let me read it. It says, from an article in the January-February 1994 issue of Quill magazine about the claim by Dr. John Pierce that the Joe Camel cigarette ads were responsible for a sharp increase in teen smoking. So Dr. John Pierce made what kind of a claim? This is number 20 in 5-3, by the way. He made our good friend a causal claim. He says the new Joe Camel advertising strategy is what has led to a sharp increase in teen smoking. Now let's read the data by which he tries to support the causal assertion. His study shows that first-time smokers among Californians from the ages of 16 to 18 had steadily declined from 12.5% in 1975 to 6.2% in 1988. Now that means that the percent that it went down was massive. As a matter of fact, the first-time teen smoking in over a, 13-year period was cut in half. Now, next part. But then began sharply increasing again. Joe Camel, a cool-looking cartoonish character, was introduced as the camel symbol in 1988. Teenage smoking immediately began increasing by 0.7% a year through 1990. In 1992, Pierce conducted another study that showed Joe Camel was as familiar a character as Mickey Mouse to children as young as 6. Now, I remember when all of this came out. Now, the thing is, they look longitudinally from 1975 to 1988. Now, I would argue that that is indeed a steady decline as he described it. It steadily went down by half over a 13-year period. And then he refers to a 0.7% increase as a sharp increase. The thing is, if you actually set up a graph and did it in scale, that if you call that a steady decrease, that 0.7% increase would only be a steady short-term increase. And that's key. I mean, it's not a sharp increase. It would be a steady short-term increase. And I want to make that clear, short-term. Because the other problem here is, it may have just been a small uptick on the radar. Because they only looked at it for what? 2 years. The beginning part, they looked at it on a longer term. This other part, they just looked at this 2-year part. And it was not a sharp increase. I would call that a short-term steady increase, if that was a steady decrease. And by the way, folks, it's irrelevant as to whether or not 6-year-olds thought Joe Camel was as familiar a character to them as Mickey Mouse. Because you know what? We don't know how that study was conducted. And by the way, Mickey Mouse was one of Disney's lesser known characters during the 1980s. They were not pushing Mickey Mouse as much anymore. Now Mickey Mouse is what? He's back, baby, right? Mickey Mouse is now a big part of their advertising. So it really didn't surprise me that much if they weren't all that familiar with Mickey Mouse anyway. That was like a pre-my generation thing when Mickey Mouse was one of their major characters. But like I said, he's back now. And by the way, you know how it is with interviewing kids? Kids oftentimes just want to please the person who's interviewing them. Yeah, I know who Joe Camel is. No idea who Joe Camel is, but I'll say that I know who he is anyway. In other words, I don't even know if that part of the proof, even was a good study. And by the way, just as a little side note, there is sort of an underlying reason why his causal claim at least seems reasonable on the surface. Because most of us know what about advertising. Effective advertising actually does change behavior. We also know in retrospect, because the cigarette companies were forced to admit it, that they were indeed directly marketing at younger populations. Because just like McDonald's, no offense to McDonald's, but McDonald's was ahead of this curve before almost all other companies. They understood that what you want to do is to catch them young. Because if you can get people to brand identify with your company early on, and then you don't piss them off very much along the way, you will get loyal customers. And when we are younger, we are more impressionable. So this is why a lot of tobacco-related products are still marketed towards a younger demographic. They're still marketed that way because they want to, catch people while they are young. Besides, we also tend to be what when we're younger? Yeah, more impetuous, less rational, things of that nature. So if you can catch someone with a bad habit early, it is hard as Hades to break. Whereas people are less likely to start those bad habits later in life. So you got to, this is why, there is sort of an underlying induction that makes sense. They're not going to throw away advertising dollars on something that's not likely to change people's minds. I would contend that advertising has a lot to do with the way people behave. However, the evidence here does not prove that the new ad campaign was effective. Even though I do know that, very well done ad campaigns oftentimes end up showing very strong results. Very strong results. So it's not unreasonable to think that the two are connected. It's just that I would like to see more legitimate evidence than Dr. Pierce put forth. Is that pretty good? Cheers on that. Okay, hold that.